Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Nashville Mayor David Briley. We're talking about the major new jobs and investment being made in Nashville by Amazon, by EY, and some other groups here this week. It was a record week for Nashville. Mayor, these new things coming to town also have sizable incentive packages to go with it, at least for Amazon, by both the state and for Metro. What's involved, and how is it a good deal for Nashville to have to pay people to come here? Why is it a good deal for taxpayers?
Right. So the incentive package that the city offered is $500 a job for 7 years, and the maximum that could possibly be would be about $15 million a year. And
that's not way off the amount of per job thing we've offered in the past, for instance.
It's the same one. It is what we have offered many times before. And if you just look at the property taxes associated with the building that they will be in, it's quickly going to cover those incentive costs.
Since you talked about the property taxes, there have been some concern, particularly about new developments in the downtown area and other places, about the money coming in from that on property taxes, also then going back into development as a part of the TIF incentives. Is Amazon likely to ask for that and get that money, so the money doesn't wind up going to schools and police and fire, it winds up going back into the project?
No. That's not going to happen on this project. The developer is committed to building it without tax increment financing already. The city has committed to helping with some of the infrastructure there that will ultimately own, like stormwater and things like that, but there'll be no tax increment financing for this project.
The conservative libertarian group Beacon Center has already said this is a bad deal for the taxpayers, a bad deal for the state. How do you respond about that?
Well, the 5,000 families that are going to be able to get a job paying $150,000 a year, I think they would disagree. It's important for our city to continue to grow and have great jobs like this, and the investment is something we'll recoup pretty quickly from the tax revenues generated. So
these kind of incentives are just a way of life. If you want jobs, big jobs, especially important jobs to come to town, you got to pay to play? Is that basically it?
I think if you look at the incentives that other communities offered, I think New Jersey offered sometimes 7 or 8 times what we offered. Nashville is pretty frugal in this regard, but it is sort of a fact of life in terms of corporate relocations, that corporations do look for some assistance from the local community when they're building jobs like this.
The 5,000 jobs we're getting is great. The 25,000 jobs had we gotten half the headquarters, was that maybe more than we wanted to bite off at one time? I'm sure you'd tell me it was great, but that's a lot.
Well, I'm confident Nashville could have lived up to that. It would have stretched us for sure, and I think the 5,000 jobs is a sweet spot for us, and we'll be able to grow rationally and calmly with that number of additional jobs.
A lot of observers before this week would have said, well, Nashville's not going to make it because it's not transit oriented. We defeated the transit plan at the polls. Also a lot of affordable housing issues. What role did that play in your negotiations with Amazon? Did affordable housing come up? Did transit come up?
Surely. We talked with Amazon about both those issues, and they are certainly important issues here in Nashville, and we're working hard to make progress on those. But if you look at the other 19 cities involved, our issues pale in comparison to the majority of those cities. That's not something we're minimizing, but when Amazon was looking at a place to go, they looked at Nashville and saw that we were both making progress on those issues, and that the issues, relatively speaking, weren't as bad as a lot of other places.
We talked off camera that you said you thought in some ways the announcements this week were the tip of the iceberg in terms of jobs in the technical area in particular. This being on the list for Amazon and now being rewarded with a major Amazon investment, are we now on a list of other companies and things that perhaps we weren't on before? Have we seen in a different light by corporations across the country just because of the Amazon experience and what's happening?
Well, yes and no. I don't think it's just the fact that Amazon came here. I think it's pretty clear to people around the country that Nashville's a great place to live and invest, and so these are the kinds of jobs that are going to grow in our culture in the coming years, and so Nashville's going to be a great beneficiary of that, I think, and we'll see more and more of these high-paying, high-skilled jobs come into our community over the coming years.
Everybody loves all this attention and investment coming into Nashville, but how do we keep the Nashville that we all know and love to be here? I think a lot of people are concerned about that we'll lose what's been the essence of Nashville just because of all this growth.
Well, Nashville is destined to grow. I think it's what is going to happen, and there's no way in particular to slow it down. And I really don't think we want to, because for people to succeed and prosper, we need new jobs and high-paying jobs. It's my job to make sure that we protect the neighborhoods we have here in our town, to make sure that we maintain the sense of optimism that we have always had in Nashville, and that we continue to welcome new people here. I mean, I think that is one of the things that makes Nashville so special, is that over the last 100 years, when somebody new came to town, we didn't look at them as a newcomer. We looked at them as a Nashvilleian from the moment they arrived. And I think that without regard to how much we grow, we can continue to maintain that sense.
So these postings I see on Facebook and other places that say Nashville's full, go away, that's probably not a good, you think that's kind of mean-spirited?
Pat, I encourage you not to look at Facebook. Or Twitter, for that matter. I mean, seriously.
These jobs that are coming in from Amazon, they're going to start the hiring next year. How many of these are going to be local jobs, people recruited locally, versus people that might be coming from Seattle or some of the other operations that Amazon has?
It'll be a mix. As we talk to other businesses relocating or expanding here, people from around the country want to move to Nashville because it's such a great place to live. But we're also doing our best to make sure we've got all the talent in Nashville that is necessary to fill these jobs as well. And we're lucky to have Tennessee State University and Fisk and Middle Tennessee State and Vanderbilt and Trevecca and David Lipscomb and Belmont and many more all working to try and fill these jobs.
What were the other competing cities? Were we competing with anybody else for this East Coast
for this particular
hub?
one? I don't know.
There was some talk that perhaps it was 24 hours, just 24 hours before, in fact the night before Amazon fully committed to this. Did you have any moments during this negotiations where you weren't sure this was going to happen? Usually negotiations are up and down.
Well, we knew a few days before that they had made a final decision. The actual decisions about how to announce it and such were actually made the night before. And
but you never had any doubts that it was going to happen?
Well, you always have a little bit of doubt until it's actually announced. And so right until the moment I saw it pop up on Twitter that they had announced it, I was, you know, you always have a little bit of nerves. I was a lawyer for a long time, so, you know, you're paid to be nervous.
Until the jury comes in and reports, you're not quite sure what's going to happen.
That's right.
Mayor David Briley is our guest on Inside Politics. We'll continue to talk about this very interesting week in Nashville in terms of new jobs and investment. We'll talk about some other issues at the courthouse after this break.